My stepdaughter, Ilara, threw me out of my own farmhouse. She branded me a worthless relic and declared my spot was in the scrap heap. What she failed to grasp was that I control the corporation her spouse toils for. In truth, I command his fate. I placed a single call, and when they arrived at an unexpected executive session on Wednesday, their reality shattered. Before you delve deeper into this tale, share in the comments where you're tuning in from. Give it a thumbs up and follow. If you hold that kin, ought to honor their seniors, for this is a teaching they'll etch into their souls forever. The barn carried the musty tang of aged hay and faint engine oil. I, Harlan Elias Crow, 82 years old, had just come back from my routine patrol of the fence lines around the property. It's a ritual born from my time as a crop duster pilot, a regimen that hones a man's edge amid the endless fields. My departed wife Miriam always murmured that routines are the anchors against life's tempests, yet no routine, no vigilance could brace me for this blow. The message lay on the weathered oak workbench beside the tool rack. It wasn't a polished missive, it was a scrap ripped from a premium leather-bound notebook, the sort my stepdaughter Ilara began toting since her wedding. It was her script, the same elegant loops I'd guided her fingers to shape at this very bench decades past, when the wind howled through the cracks and the lantern light flickered. Father one term Stark. But the cascade that ensued was treachery incarnate, each syllable a deliberate gouge. Victor and I can no longer endure this. Endure what I pondered inwardly, a flicker of bewilderment stirring like dust in the dim air. Endure what I dwell solitary. I tend my own harvests. I maintain my own homestead. I welcome them for weekend suppers without fail. Even as they fixate on their sleek devices, their countenances aglow with artificial luminescence. I absorb their disdain. I swallow their condescension. Who precisely endures what in this equation you are too obstinate? Ah, obstinate. Indeed, that's their label. Obstinate for declining to endorse the sheaf of documents Victor Hale, my esteemed son-in-law, thrust before me last fortnight. He termed it legacy safeguarding. I named it for its essence a predatory seizure of my existence. He sought comprehensive authority encompassing health and finances. Merely procedural Harlan, he'd intoned his timbre oily with the contrived assurance of a 52-year-old executive who presumes omniscience. I rebuffed him. That was my obstinacy. I perused the subsequent line. My vision swept it, yet my cognition balked at assimilation. The farmstead is liquidated. I reread it thrice. Liquidated. How could they liquidate it? The title rests in my name, mine and Miriam's. Following her departure 15 years prior, it devolved solely to me. Every beam, every acre. The fresh proprietors will materialize in 72 hours. Your possessions will relocate to a depot locker. Depot. They were consigning 50 years of my existence, of our existence, into a frigid, shadowed concrete vault. And then the concluding phrase inscribed in crimson marker, underscored thrice to ensure the malice pierced deep. We've secured you a berth at Twilight Meadows Retirement Facility. Your spot is in the scrap heap. Scrap heap. I sensed no blaze. I uttered no roar. I quivered not. I experienced chill, a profound glacial chill that originated in my core and radiated to my extremities. It was the chill of utter abyssal disloyalty. My soul kin, Ilara. The young girl I'd cradled on her arrival day. The offspring I'd escorted to the altar had just decreed my spot was in the scrap heap. I surveyed my barn. This barn where Miriam and I shared our inaugural waltz the day we claimed the keys 50 years ago, chuckling as we twirled on the dirt floor, the scent of fresh-cut timber lingering heavy. This earthen ground, compacted and scarred, is where Ilara ventured her initial strides, her tiny fists clutching my overalls for steadiness. This sturdy workbench is where I steadfastly aided her with her geometry assignments, evening after evening, until the theorems clicked the lamplight, casting long shadows that danced with our frustrations and triumphs. Every recollection, every chuckle, every sorrow liquidated. How the endorsement Victor. It had to be Victor. He labors at that vast agro-tech conglomerate Harvest Dynamics. He perpetually deemed himself the keenest presence. He regarded me as an antiquity, an aged ex-pilot, a rustic bumpkin. Savor the leisure, Harlan, he'd remarked last month during weekend supper, clapping my shoulder with excessive vigor, the impact echoing like a subtle challenge. Don't strain yourself. He had no inkling that the enterprise where he parades as a chief director. No, not yet. Concentrate. 72 hours. They allotted me 72 hours. They anticipated frenzy. They presumed I'd ring them, sobbing, imploring. They viewed me as an 82-year-old worthless relic precisely as the message proclaimed. They don't comprehend me. They never did. Not even my own stepdaughter. I ambled to the porch overhang, the message balled in my grip. And there it loomed, the secondary affront. A vivid scarlet disposed placard staked with brazen audacity, squarely in the midst of the pasture I'd grazed just 3 days prior, the grass still bearing the faint imprint of my boots amid the morning dew. It wasn't a standard marker. It was from an upscale agrarian broker I'd never encountered. Hale Ventures. Hale. Victor's surname. Naturally, he wasn't merely concealing his transgression. He was imprinting it. He reveled in it. Mr. Whitaker, my 85-year-old neighbor from the adjacent plot, was inspecting his irrigation lines. He spotted me. He spotted the placard. His visage creased in perplexity. "Oh, Harlan," he hollered, trudging deliberately across the boundary fence, his flannel shirt billowing in the dry breeze. "I didn't realize you were relocating. Why the haste? You faring all right, pal? What could I convey that my stepdaughter had ousted me, that I was being discarded like obsolete machinery?" I compelled a nod. My gullet constricted, the words sticking like dust in the arid air. "Aye, sir, it's merely time for fresh horizons. But this farmstead—" He uttered his tone laden with reminiscence, the wind carrying hints of turned soil and distant rain. "This farmstead is a county cornerstone. You and Miriam, you cultivated this land." "Aye, sir," I replied, the term cornerstone reverberating in my skull like a tolling bell. "We did. This farmstead nestles in the old heartland of Nebraska. When Miriam and I acquired it with our last savings, this was the soul of the farming enclave. We witnessed this terrain through all trials. We observed youngsters we mentored mature and depart. Then we beheld the newcomers arrive. Corporate outfits erecting vast automated silos that overshadowed our modest wooden barns. They dub it modernization. I dub it encroachment. Victor dubbed it a treasure trove. "You're perched on a treasure trove, Harlan," he'd declared, his jaws stuffed with the venison I'd slow roasted for 14 hours. This was at our recent weekend supper, the aroma of herbs and smoke still clinging to the air like a fading memory. "This relic of yours is valued at least $3 million in soil worth alone." I'd rectified him then. "It's not a relic, Victor. It's my homestead. It was Miriam's homestead." He chortled. That belittling, piercing chortle I'd grown to loathe, cutting through the room like a scythe. "Whatever you claim relic. Just cling to your cherished timbers." Now I comprehended. He wasn't proposing. He was scouting. And my stepdaughter, my Alara, had endorsed the disloyalty. I pivoted and retreated indoors past the barn into the parlor. I settled in Miriam's rocker. The upholstery was frayed, discolored, but I retained it. I could still detect her aroma on it, if I strained wildflowers and fresh linen evoking the fields in bloom. "Vow to me, Harlan," she breathed that final evening in the clinic, her palm fragile in mine, the sterile scent of antiseptic warring with her faint essence. "You'll safeguard her. Alara is... she's susceptible. Don't permit this realm to embitter her. Shield her." I faltered, you Miriam. I faltered utterly. Alara transformed. The alteration commenced 7 years ago, the day she encountered Victor Hale at some opulent industry gala. I never fathomed why Alara attended. She was employed part-time in a local crafts boutique. Victor was the centerpiece and ascending luminary chief director at Harvest Dynamics. Fair-haired, a dazzling grin worth a fortune, and the vacant gaze of a predator lurking in the shadows. He captivated my stepdaughter. He unveiled a realm I never did, for I deliberately veiled that realm. A domain of elite eateries, polished hover vehicles, and escapades to retreats where costs are unspoken. Alara, my lass, who once thrilled at a vintage map I'd unearthed, abruptly spoke solely of luxury purses and exclusive lodges. "Father, I'm ashamed." She admitted one evening post Victor's inaugural visit to this farmstead, the confession hanging heavy in the air, thick with unspoken regret. Ashamed of what, darling, of this? She gestured broadly around the chamber, her hand slicing through the dim light. This farmstead, the antiquated furnishings, this backcountry, your vocation. Victor is accustomed to superior. What did I respond, I recall? I said, if a fellow appraises you by your sire's holdings rather than your essence, he's not the fellow for you. She erupted in sobs. You don't comprehend. You never comprehend. She was accurate. I didn't comprehend. I didn't grasp how one could excise their foundation so swiftly, so impeccably. Their nuptials was an extravaganza, a $200,000 spectacle. I stood there in a borrowed formal coat, sensing like an interloper amid the glittering lights and false cheer. Victor financed it a magnanimous act he ensured every attendee acknowledged. Fret not, Harlan, he proclaimed boisterously to his cadre of polished, affluent associates. I've handled it. Father-in-law is secured. His comrades gazed at me with that dreadful, courteous sympathy. The destitute old pilot father-in-law. I permitted them to presume it. I allowed them all to presume I was destitute. Why, for Miriam? I cherish this existence, Harlan, she confided years upon years ago. It was immediately after Harvest Dynamics. My enterprise had inked its inaugural major pact with a national grain syndicate. I cherish our farmstead. I cherish our countryside. Never allow that wealth alter us. Vow will eternally remain us. And I vowed. I installed a reliable executive to helm the firm. I preserved my 60% dominant stake and became the phantom originator on the council. I formally retired from crop dusting, a pursuit I'd genuinely pursued for 12 years before harvest surged, and I subsisted on that annuity, the millions in periodic payouts. They funneled directly into a concealed fund, the Miriam Crow Fund. Victor was ignorant. He, a chief director, had no notion that the aged pilot he scorned was indeed his supreme overseer. He had no notion he labored for me, and now he had liquidated my farmstead beneath me. He had falsified my endorsement. He had authorized documents to institutionalize me. He had labeled me scrap. He transgressed the boundary. He compelled me to fracture my vow to Miriam. The chill in my core dissipated. It yielded to something else, a scorching, pristine, illuminating fury like the sun breaking through storm clouds over the endless plains. They declared my spot was in the scrap heap. Very well, I'll demonstrate. I'll illustrate precisely what transpires when you attempt to discard the man who possesses the entire junkyard. My initial impulse was not to contact Alara. It was not to punch her digits and bellow into the receiver. It was not to plead. Pleading is exactly what they anticipated. Turmoil is what they craved. They were banking on the worthless relic to disintegrate to validate their narrative. They desired me to wring them weeping so Victor could pivot to Alara and utter, "Observe, he's unhinged. He's incapable. We're executing the correct course." No, I would not bestow them the gratification. My secondary impulse was not to bundle. The message stated, my possessions would transfer to a depot. My possessions. I scanned the parlor. Miriam's rocker, the one with the threadbare arms softened by years of gentle rocking through sleepless nights. The lofty pine shelf I'd constructed with my bare hands. The one cradling the aviation tomes I'd recited to Alara. The solid maple bureau in the nook. That bureau is where I perched right here in this homestead and endorsed the formation documents for Harvest Dynamics while she slumbered in her cradle above. These are not possessions. This is my existence. This is our existence. And I would not assemble a solitary crate. I would not elevate one digit to assist them obliterate me. I proceeded to the barn, my grasp firm. The frigid fury had coalesced into a sort of serenity, a precise, incisive clarity, like the sharp focus before a storm hits the horizon. I yanked open the utility drawer by the workbench, the one that perpetually jams with a grating scrape. I delved past rusted nails and depleted cells and located what I sought, a broad, indigo, indelible stylus. I uncorked it. The acrid chemical odor of the pigment saturated the barn. It reeked of irrevocability, mingling with the earthy undertones of hay and soil. I flattened the vicious rushed message from Alara. I inverted it. The ivory reverse was vacant, pristine, a blank canvas. My grasp did not falter. I applied the wide wedge tip to the sheet and inscribed two terms, merely two, in large, audacious, wrathful indigo characters. Verify Wednesday. I advanced to the entrance portal. I peered through the spy hole. The scarlet disposed placard persisted, taunting me from the pasture. I located the coil of binding strap they must have abandoned, likely presuming I'd employ it to encase my own existence. I tore off a lengthy resonant segment. I positioned the message, my two terms oriented inward, and affixed it securely to the interior of the portal. I desired it to be the initial sight upon their return, and they would return. Why Wednesday? Because Wednesday at 11 a.m. precise is when the seasonal review at Harvest Dynamics commences. Wednesday is when the bookkeeper's companions of victors, undoubtedly but experts nonetheless, will commence unraveling the strands on his expenditure logs. Wednesday is when the $3 million void he frantically requires to seal the void he intended to mend by illicitly liquidating my farmstead morphs into a $5 million abyss that will engulf him entirely. Victor is a dolt, a covetous, haughty, myopic dolt. He fancies himself a hawk, but he's merely a crow pursuing a tractor. He believes he can shuffle funds around my funds for my enterprise and none will detect. He believes he can counterfeit an authority grant. My thoughts flashed rearward a year prior. Elara at my workbench, beaming, propelling a dense bundle of sheets toward me. Father, it's merely standard forms for my levies. Something for Victor's bookkeeper. Can you merely endorse here, here, and here? I recollected my reluctance. It seemed excessive pages. But I gazed at my stepdaughter, the young lass I'd nurtured and I endorsed. That was my blunder. My trust, my obstinacy was in not endorsing the fresh forms last fortnight, the ones that would have proclaimed me unfit. This message, this ousting, wasn't merely brutality. It was a frantic maneuver. It was the clumsy labor of a frantic novice. Victor requires me vanished before Wednesday. He requires me confined in Twilight Meadows. He requires me juridically proclaimed unfit, so he can stride into that lender, annul my denial, and propel the liquidation of this farmstead through. He requires me muted. They misjudged me. They perpetually have. They perceive the aged pilot. They perceive the reserved elder in the waning countryside mending his barriers. They don't perceive the man who forged an agrotech dominion from a solitary weathered biplane because he discerned configurations when all others beheld disarray. And I discern the configuration now. Victor is ensnared. Elara is accomplice. They've overextended their grasp. I lingered there for an extended duration, merely gazing at the two terms I'd scripted. They would return. Oh yes, not in 72 hours to inspect the relic. They would return on Wednesday. When that lender summons informing Victor the advance is rejected. When the reviewers commence posing inquiries he can't resolve. When his whole contrived realm commences to crumble, they would surge back here. They would erupt through that portal in a sightless, beastly frenzy, seeking me, seeking a method to mend what they had fractured. And those two terms would be the initial greeting, a enigma, a rendezvous, a pledge. By the moment they deciphered its implication, it would be vastly too tardy. The snare would already be triggered. I didn't contact Elara. I didn't summon the authorities. I didn't ring the sham broker. I advanced to the vintage wall-mounted communicator in the corridor, the bulky gray one that Miriam always adored because the chime resonated as she expressed like an authentic communicator. I lifted the handset and dialed a sequence I knew innately, a sequence I hadn't dialed in 7 years. It chimed once, twice. On the third chime, a profound familiar timbre responded, not with greetings, but with a straightforward interrogative Harlan. Desmond. It's me. There was an extended hush on the opposing terminus. Desmond Locke and I had been comrades for 60 years. We matured conjointly in this countryside. We chased games in the same dusty meadows, and we attended the State Agrarian College conjointly. He became an attorney, one of the most astute in the Midwest. I erected an empire. He was the sole individual on Earth besides Miriam who knew the verity. He was the designer of the barrier I'd erected around my existence. Harlan, he uttered again his timbre, weighty, proficient, and replete with a dreadful comprehension. You realize what this summons signifies. Are you utterly certain? I gazed at the message still balled in my alternate grasp. I gazed at the disposed placard on my pasture. I gazed at Miriam's rocker. Are you certain? He urged, his attorney's intellect already navigating the cataclysmic ramifications. Once this alarm is sounded, Harlan, you can't unsound it. Your existence, the one you've sustained for the last 25 years. It's concluded. They liquidated Miriam's farmstead, Desmond. I said, my voice subdued, stripped of all sentiment. The line descended into dead hush. Desmond had cherished Miriam too. He was the witness at our union. He grasped what those terms signified. It wasn't concerning the holdings. It wasn't concerning the $3 million in soil value. It was concerning her. It was concerning the vow. They liquidated her farmstead, I reiterated, and they bequeathed me a message. They declared my spot is in the scrap heap. I heard Desmond draw in sharply, a resonance of restrained ire. Who Victor, that haughty dolt? And Alara, I said. The appellation savored like cinders in my maw. Desmond didn't utter, I warned you. Though he possessed every entitlement too. He had cautioned me about Victor. He had cautioned me about Alara's expenditure patterns. He had cautioned me that my serene, unassuming existence was a lovely vision that couldn't endure eternally in a realm brimming with predators. What do you require me to execute, Harlan? He inquired. His timbre was all enterprise now. I require you to execute it all I said. The complete contingency. No, I said, contemplating. Not the complete contingency. That's for when I'm departed. I halted, then uttered the terms I never envisioned I would. Desmond initiate the Miriam contingency. This was a fresh hush, a distinct variety, a ponderous, profound stillness. The Miriam contingency was not component of our primal scheme. It was something I'd requested Desmond to compose roughly 4 years ago after Victor and Alara's nuptials. It was a fallback strategy, a ultimate recourse. It was crafted to shield the enterprise from my own kin. I'd prayed I'd never necessitate to deploy it. It was a stratagem so exact, so ruinous, it would disassemble their whole existences without me ever needing to elevate my timbre. Desmond ultimately spoke. Harlan. The Miriam contingency is not a cautionary volley. It's a lethal strike. It's scorched terrain. It will unveil everything. The ledgers, the fund, the equities. It will unveil you. Are you prepared for that? They labeled me a worthless relic. Desmond. They declared my spot was in the scrap heap. They planted a disposed placard on Miriam's pasture. I am not inquiring if I am prepared. I am instructing you to implement, comprehended, Desmond said. His timbre was somber. Stage 1. I'll immobilize the Hale auxiliary ledger forthwith. I nearly chortled. Victor and Alara didn't even recognize that ledger existed. It was a subsidiary of the primary fund one I'd established to anonymously discharge their mounting charge debts. Their vehicle advances the initial payment on their urban loft. They merely presumed they were adept with finances. They were about to discover they were simply well subsidized. Stage 2. Desmond proceeded. I will alert the lender that all authority grant documents past, present, and future linked to your name are under scrutiny for deception. The falsified authority Victor utilized to liquidate the farmstead will be invalid before the pigment dries on his fresh advance petition. Good, I said. That will halt the liquidation frigid. It will accomplish more than that, Harlan. It will activate a penal inquiry. When that falsified document reaches the lender's legal division, it's terminated for him. Good, I said anew. And stage 3, the Harvest Council. This is the major one, Harlan. This is the one you can't retract. I know what it is, I said. The contingency mandates me to summon an urgent assembly of the Directors' Council, Desmond said, as if reciting from the text itself. It mandates me to notify them that the phantom originator is invoking his dominant shareholder privileges and will be present personally to confront egregious misconduct at the managerial echelon. When is the seasonal review? Desmond Barter queried, though I already knew. Wednesday, 11 a.m., he responded. Then the urgent assembly will be Wednesday, 11 a.m. in the primary council chamber. Harlan Desmond said one final occasion. This will annihilate them. Your stepdaughter, Victor, they're standing their existences. There is no rebound from this. I gazed at the message in my grasp. Your spot is in the scrap heap. I know, I said. That's the intent. Initiate the Miriam contingency, Desmond, and have a transport awaiting me. I'm departing the farmstead. Where are you heading? The Summit Lodge, the Apex Suite. I reckon after 50 years it's time I commence dwelling like the man they presume I'm not. It's executed, Harlan, Desmond said. The alarm is sounded. I'll encounter you on Wednesday, Mr. Originator. He disconnected. I positioned the hefty handset back on the cradle. The vintage communicator emitted a subdued final snap. It was executed. I exited the barn past Miriam's rocker and directed for the entrance portal, leaving the message with my 2 terms affixed to the interior. I didn't assemble a valise. I didn't seize a solitary item except for the modest worn image of Miriam I perpetually retained in my billfold. I stepped onto the porch overhang and sealed the portal behind me. I didn't secure it. It wasn't my farmstead anymore. It was testimony. I rose from the workbench. The dialogue with Desmond was concluded. The contingency was operative. The elements were in motion. I didn't proceed to the sleeping chamber. I didn't unlatch my wardrobe. I didn't extend for a carry-all or a satchel. They were anticipating me to bundle my fractured existence to transport my worthless belongings to their assigned depot locker. They were anticipating me to be the man they perceived the man who salvages old twine in vacant vessels. I would not be that man. I advanced to the modest stand by the entrance portal. My billfold was there, an aged tan leather trifold, supple and worn at the borders, fissured like parched earth. It was the ultimate gift Miriam ever bestowed me. I retrieved it and inserted it in my rear pouch. Beside where the billfold rested was a diminutive brass-framed portrait. It contained my cherished depiction of her. It was from a harvest festival at the county fair perhaps 25 years ago. The sunlight was in her eyes, compelling her to squint, and she was amid a guffaw, her head flung back. She was radiant. My digits, steadfast and assured, unlatched the plain clasp on the rear of the frame. I extracted the depiction. The backing felt tepid. I didn't gaze at the vacant frame. I delicately positioned the depiction in the inner breast pouch of my coat directly over my heart. A billfold and a portrait. That was all I would convey. 50 years of existence. And ultimately, it distilled to this. Everything else in this farmstead was merely fixtures. They could possess it. They could contend over the remnants. I advanced to the entrance portal. I beheld the message I'd affixed to the interior, my own indigo wrathful characters glaring back at me. Verify Wednesday. A grim rendezvous. I placed my grasp on the portal knob. I opened the portal, the familiar groan of the old hinges. A resonance that had been the accompaniment to my existence, Alara dashing out to lessons me, returning from my flights, Miriam welcoming me with an embrace. It resonated differently now. It resonated conclusive, echoing in the still air like a farewell. I stepped onto the porch overhang. The crisp Nebraska breeze struck my face. I could smell my neighbor's wheat ripening. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The bright garish crimson disposed placard. It was a dagger plunged through the core of my pasture, a testament to their avarice. I made a deliberate choice. I did not turn my head. I did not grant it the satisfaction of my gaze. To regard it was to acknowledge their power to validate their disloyalty. I would not. I stared straight ahead at the rutted driveway that led to the road. I pulled the entrance portal shut behind me. I didn't hear it latch. I didn't check if it was locked. It wasn't my farmstead anymore. It was a crime locale. It was a snare. It was their dilemma now. I descended the 4 porch steps, my grasp brushing the old iron railing Miriam always said we needed to refinish the metal cool and rough under my palm. I traversed down the gravel path. I walked right past the crimson placard. I did not look back. I was not just leaving a structure of wood and stone. I was leaving the past. I was leaving the specter of Harlan the pilot. I was leaving the mourning widower, the unassuming silent sire. The man they thought they knew, The man they thought they could discard was gone. The man striding onto the road, the man who turned left toward the main thoroughfare to hail a ride, was someone else entirely. He was Harlan Elias Crow, originator of the board, and he was marching to conflict. I stood on the verge of the road I'd resided on for 50 years. My feet were planted on the cracked asphalt where I'd taught Elara to maneuver her tractor. I did not feel wistful. I felt liberated, the wind whispering promises of reckoning through the fields. I raised my hand not with the frailty of an 82-year-old man, but with the crisp authority of someone summoning transport, a battered pickup, old and smelling faintly of manure and oil, pulled over. This was ideal. They expected me to be impotent. They expected me to be confined. They probably thought I'd be perched on the overhang weeping until the new proprietors arrived. They never imagined I'd simply depart. The driver, a young fellow with a cap, barely glanced at me. "Where to Gramps?" Gramps, I almost smiled. That's what they all saw. "Just an old man downtown," I said, my voice clear. "The Pinnacle Resort." The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. I saw his eyes flick over my simple jacket, my old man slacks, my worn boots. He saw the retired pilot. He didn't see the man who owned the land his trucking firm probably leased its depot from. "The Pinnacle Resort. You sure, Gramps? That's a fancy folks spot." "I am aware," I said, my voice flat. "Just drive." He shrugged and merged into traffic. I watched my countryside fade through the grimy window. I saw the corner co-op where I bought Elara treats. I saw the meadow where I taught her to fly kites. I saw the wooden facade of my home, my former home, recede smaller and smaller until it was just another farmstead on another road. My stepdaughter, my Elara. She thought she was consigning me to the scrap heap. She thought she was dooming me to an elder's lodge. She thought she was triumphing. What she never grasped, what I'd meticulously concealed from her, was that I constructed the realm she was striving to dazzle. Victor, her predator-gazed spouse, was so proud of his director title at Harvest Dynamics. He was so proud of his 7-figure compensation and his firm vehicle and his equity grants. He had no notion he was a glorified subordinate. He had no notion that his entire vocation, his entire sense of supremacy, was a boon that I'd permitted him to possess. And now he had wielded that boon to attempt to ruin me. The pickup rattled over the paved entrance of the resort. The Pinnacle Resort ascended before us, a gleaming spire of alloy and glass. It was a different realm, a realm of quiet, effortless affluence where the air hummed with subtle energy fields. The driver halted behind a sleek, autonomous sedan. He looked uneasy. "That'll be $35, Gramps." I pulled out my old leather billfold, the one Miriam gave me. I didn't pull out a fancy credit chip. I pulled out two $40 bills. "Keep the change, son," I said. I stepped out of the pickup, and the world shifted. The moment my worn boot hit the pavement, a man in a crisp navy overcoat and white gloves stepped forward. He wasn't the driver. He was the porter. He was older, distinguished, with gray at his temples. He didn't look at my old jacket. He didn't look at my weary face. He looked me straight in the eye, and his professional demeanor vanished, replaced by a look of profound, genuine respect. He inclined his head slightly, not in subservience, but in acknowledgement. "Good evening, Mr. Crow," he said. His voice was deep and respectful. "We have been anticipating you." I saw the pickup driver's face in his mirror. His jaw was slack. He was staring at the porter, then at me, then back at the porter. His brain trying to process how Gramps in the worn jacket was being greeted by name at the most opulent resort in the heartland. "Thank you, Reginald," I said, nodding to the porter. "It's good to be back." "It has been too long," Sir Reginald replied. He opened the massive crystal door, holding it for me. "Ms. Harlow is waiting for you at the private reception." I walked into the atrium. It was silent. The floors were polished granite that reflected the soft amber light from the holograms. A massive arrangement of fresh irises and lotuses sat in the center of the room, their fragrance filling the air like a gentle mist. There was no cue. There was no clamor, just the faint hum of a synthetic orchestra playing somewhere in the distance. People here didn't discuss wealth. They didn't need to. Victor and Elara, with their loud talk of $3 million and their flashy leased glider, would have looked like novices in this room. They were new affluents desperate to prove they belonged. They didn't understand that the people in this edifice, the real affluents, preferred silence. I walked past the main reception. A woman in a black tailored ensemble stepped out from a discreet office. She was Ms. Harlow, the resort overseer. Mr. Crow. She said, her smile warm and immediate. Welcome home. We have the Apex suite prepared for you just as you always prefer. Will you be needing anything tonight? A late supper, perhaps? Elara thought I was en route to Twilight Meadows, a shared berth, a bunk, a composite floor that smelled of sanitizer. She thought I was heading to the scrap heap. No thank you, Lydia, I said. Just tea strong and the secure channel to my bureau. She handed me a simple heavy access token. No registration, no credit required. My name was already on the ledger. It had been for 25 years. Of course, sir. The suite is ready. Your directives for the Miriam contingency have been received. The secure channel is active. I took the private lift, the one that bypasses the main guest levels. The car was lined with dark alloy and plush fabric, ascending silently, smoothly. My reflection looked back at me in the mirrored wall. I still looked like the retired pilot, the old clothes, the tired eyes. But the man in the reflection wasn't broken. He wasn't helpless. The lift doors opened directly into the suite, the Apex suite. It was vast. The ceiling was 40 feet high. An entire wall was transparent, a panoramic, breathtaking view of the Nebraska skyline where city lights blended with distant automated farms glowing under energy domes. A grand synthesizer sat in one corner. A massive ivory lounge was arranged in the center of the room. A hearth currently dormant was built into a quartz wall. This wasn't a resort room. This was an Aerie. This was my other home, the one Elara and Victor never knew existed. I walked across the plush, silent flooring to the window. I looked down on the city. My city. Harvest Dynamics headquarters was down there, that tall obsidian tower to the right. Victor was probably asleep in his loft right now, dreaming of the $3 million he thought he had pilfered. Elara was probably dreaming of how she would expend it. They thought they were strategists. They thought they were astute. They thought they were discarding me. I took the small, faded image of Miriam from my coat pocket. I looked at her laughing face, squinting in the sun. I tried Miriam, I whispered to the glass. I tried to keep the vow. I tried to live the simple life you loved. I tried to shield her. I felt a familiar sting behind my eyes, but it wasn't sorrow. It was that cold, clean fury again. But they liquidated your farmstead, I said. They put a price on our life. They put a price on you. A quiet rap came from the service entrance. A young man in a formal vest rolled in a silver cart. He placed a pot of steaming, robust tea, a single mug, and a secure encrypted relay device on the crystal desk. He bowed and left, without a word. I sat down. I poured the tea. It was Darjeeling high grade, my favorite, the kind I hadn't had in years because Miriam always said it was too lavish. I picked up the secure device. I looked at the city lights. I looked at Miriam's picture. The audience, the people observing my life, they just saw the first twist. They just realized the worthless relic wasn't impoverished. They thought this was the end of the story. They thought I would just dwell here in opulence while my stepdaughter imploded. They were mistaken. This wasn't the end. This was the commencement. This wasn't about the wealth. It was about equity. It was about the vow. I picked up the device. I knew exactly who to call. Desmond. I said when he answered, "It's done. I'm in. Now I want you to tell me everything the private examiner found. Tell me about the deception. Tell me about the falsified endorsement. Tell me exactly how my stepdaughter and her spouse planned to put me in the scrap heap. I want every single filthy detail, because on Wednesday, I'm not just reclaiming my farmstead, I'm reclaiming my enterprise." I was on my second mug of tea when the knock came. It wasn't the timid tap of resort staff. It was firm, precise, and patient. 2 raps the signal we had agreed on. I opened the heavy door. Desmond Locke stood in the hallway, looking like he always did. While I had spent 25 years perfecting the art of appearing invisible, Desmond had spent 25 years perfecting the art of being noticed. He was 83 sharp and wore his power like the perfectly tailored 3-piece slate suit that fit his frame. He was one of the most respected and feared corporate attorneys in the Midwest. He was also the only man alive I trusted with my life. He didn't greet me with a hello. He just nodded his eyes, taking in the opulent suite. "Harlan, He said, his voice a low rumble. You always did have a flair for the dramatic, the Apex suite. It's quiet, Desmond, I said, closing the door behind him. And the view is good. Tea. No, he said. He walked past the grand synthesizer and placed his heavy worn leather briefcase on the crystal desk. The click of the brass latches opening echoed in the silent room like a distant thunder. I'm not here for a social call. He didn't look angry. He looked weary. He looked like a man who had seen too much and was about to see more. The Miriam contingency is in motion. He said stage 1 is complete. The Hale auxiliary ledger is frozen. As of 5 minutes ago, their credit chips are just inert. Good, I said, turning to face him. And the Farmstead stage 2 is filed, Desmond said. The lender's legal division gets the fraud alert at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The falsified authority is void. The liquidation is dead. They just don't know it yet. I nodded, feeling a small, cold knot of satisfaction tightening like a noose in the wind. So it's done. Desmond looked at me and his expression was somber. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out not just a few papers, but a thick 3-inch binder bound in black. He didn't hand it to me. He dropped it on the desk. The sound was a heavy, dull thud that reverberated through the suite. No, Harlan, he said, his voice low. It's not done. It's just beginning. I've been excavating ever since you mentioned Victor was acting suspicious last year. I hired a private examiner, a forensic bookkeeper. I was hoping I was wrong. He pushed the binder toward me. It's worse than we thought, Harlan. Much, much worse. My blood ran cold again, a feeling I was getting accustomed to, like the chill of an approaching front. Worse. What's worse than them falsifying my name and hurling me out of my own farmstead? Desmond opened the binder. The first page was a flowchart, a spider's web of shell entities and offshore ledgers. Victor isn't just a greedy son-in-law, Harlan. He's a felon, and he's been using your enterprise, our enterprise, as his personal vault for 20 months. I stared at the paper, my mind refusing to connect the dots amid the growing shadows. Harvest my enterprise impossible. Barrett. The executive, he guards the ledgers like a sentinel. Barrett guards the entrance, Desmond said, his voice sharp. Victor has been draining millions out the rear. He's the chief director of expansions. He's the man Barrett trusts to scout and acquire new silos, new processing hubs. It was the perfect position for a pilferer. Desmond's finger traced the path of the funds, each line a vein of betrayal pulsing in the dim light. It's a classic overcharge scheme, Harlan, but on a colossal scale. He's been doing it for 20 months. He locates a silo in Kansas worth, say, $10 million. He uses a shell entity, Hale Augury LLC, to purchase it first. He buys it for 10. The intermediary. I breathed, feeling sick, the room's air suddenly thick and oppressive. The intermediary, Desmond confirmed. 1 week later, he, acting as Harvest's chief director of expansions, buys the exact same silo from his own shell entity for $15 million. He authorizes the payment from Harvest's ledgers. He pockets the $5 million difference, and Barrett, trusting his star director, endorses it. $5 million. I said, my mind racing. This wasn't just family disloyalty. This was a federal offense. This was transfer fraud. This was the kind of thing that doesn't just get you dismissed, it gets you 15 to 25 in a federal penitentiary. He's done it 4 times, Desmond continued. No, wait. The private examiner found another one just last month in Iowa. 5 times. He's bled this enterprise for nearly $25 million. $25 million. I was on my feet now. Impossible. Barrett would detect that. The council would detect that. A $25 million discrepancy. Not if he didn't report the inflated price, Desmond said. He's smarter than that. I'll grant him that much. He reported the correct purchase price to the council, the $10 million. He covered the extra $5 million he stole each time by bundling it. He faked invoices for tech upgrades, zoning levies, transport tariffs, labor hazard compensation. He buried the theft under a mountain of fake paperwork. He's been bleeding the enterprise dry, $5 million at a time, and telling Barrett it's just the cost of operating in a new territory. I walked to the window, staring down at the city lights twinkling like distant stars over the automated fields. I felt the glass cool against my forehead, a stark contrast to the heat building inside. But a review, Desmond, we conduct reviews. Barrett is merciless about the reviews. And that Desmond said his voice now quiet is why we are here. That is why your pasture has a disposed placard on it. Victor got careless. The last deal, the one in Iowa, he got too covetous. He tried to pull $8 million out in one go. The paperwork didn't clear fast enough. He left a void, a $5 million void in the seasonal expenditures that he couldn't cover in time. I turned around slowly, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place with a resounding snap. And the seasonal review is Wednesday, Desmond said. 11 a.m. sharp. My own words written on the back of Ilara's message flashed in my mind. Verify Wednesday. He's in a panic. I said, the realization dawning like a storm cloud gathering. He was counting on the $3 million loan for my farmstead liquidation to hit his ledger by tomorrow. He was going to use my funds to create more fake invoices to plug the $5 million void just long enough to pass the review. He wasn't trying to get rich off my farmstead, Desmond. No, Harlan. Desmond said, shaking his head. He was trying to stay out of incarceration. And the 72-hour deadline, I whispered the message. It wasn't just to be cruel, it was his timeline. He needed me gone. He needed you gone. Desmond agreed. Or he needed you silent. Which brings us to the last and most nauseating part of this. My stomach clenched, twisting like vines in a gale. There's more. Desmond didn't say anything. He just turned to the last section of the binder. It wasn't a financial report. It was a tribunal filing. He slid it across the desk. I read the title. Petition for Urgent Guardianship of Harlan Elias Crow. I sank into the chair. I read the words. Afflicted with progressive senility, a peril to himself. Delusional paranoia, incapable of handling his own matters. This was strategy. Desmond said softly. They filed this last fortnight. They were going to get a magistrate to declare you legally unfit first. Victor, as your loving son-in-law and holder of the falsified authority, would then have the legal right to liquidate your farmstead, manage all your assets, and institutionalize you. Institutionalize me, I repeated. The word felt alien, echoing in the vast suite. Twilight Meadows. That was the name on the message, wasn't it? Desmond said. They'd already selected your berth. I remembered last fortnight, Victor and Ilara at my workbench. Father, we just need you to endorse these last legacy forms. I had refused. I had told them I would review them with my attorney. I thought I was just being cautious. I was signing my own demise warrant. Your refusal, Desmond said, reading my mind. Your obstinacy, that's what triggered this. You alarmed them. You were too lucid. They realized strategy A wouldn't work in time, so they accelerated to strategy B, a falsified liquidation, a desperate, sloppy attempt to get the funds before the Wednesday review. And they needed you out of the farmstead, out of the way before the real proprietors showed up. I looked at the endorsement on the affidavit, the sworn statement attesting to my paranoia and senility. The endorsement was clear, beautiful, and precise. Ilara Hale. They were going to confine me, I said, the words catching in my throat like thorns. My own stepdaughter, my young lass. She was going to have me institutionalized. Yes, Desmond said. He closed the binder. The sound was final, like a gate slamming shut. They were going to put you in a facility, Harlan. They were going to throw you in the scrap heap so Victor could avoid prison. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. I owned the lights flickering like fireflies in the night. It was never about the funds, Harlan. It was about his survival. And Ilara, she was the one who handed him the blade. I stared at the black binder. It had her name on it. Ilara Hale. I shook my head. The word no formed in my throat, but it wouldn't emerge. I could believe it of Victor. Victor was a stranger, an outsider, a covetous, haughty fool I'd never trusted. I could see him falsifying my name. I could see him pilfering from the enterprise. That was commerce. That was just crime. But this was blood. No. I finally managed to say, my voice a dry rasp. Not Ilara. You're mistaken, Desmond. I stood up from the desk and walked back to the vast window, turning my back on him. I couldn't look at that binder. Victor did this. Victor coerced her. He's a manipulator. He must have threatened her. She scared Desmond. That's my young lass. She wouldn't. She couldn't. I thought of her. Not the 45-year-old woman in designer attire, but the 8-year-old girl with braids crying because she stumbled off her pony. I thought of the adolescent I'd comforted when her first suitor shattered her heart. I thought of the young woman who wept at Miriam's funeral, her hand clinging to mine like a lifeline amid the grief. She loved her mother, I whispered to the glass. She loved Miriam. She wouldn't do this. She wouldn't liquidate her mother's farmstead. She wouldn't plot to put her own father in the scrap heap. I turned back to Desmond, my heart pleading with him to concur with me, to tell me there was a blunder. She's weak. Desmond. Victor is strong. He's a corporate man with a grand title. He probably convinced her this was all legal, that it was for my own good. Desmond just looked at me. He didn't flinch. His eyes were full of a terrible, sad pity. But not for her. For me. Harlan? He said, his voice quiet but firm. Sit down. I didn't move. Sit down, Harlan. He repeated, his voice hardening. This is the part you're not going to want to see. This is the part that will break you, but you have to see it. I slowly walked back and sat in the chair, my legs feeling like lead weights sinking into the plush carpet. Victor didn't coerce her, Harlan. Desmond said, his voice softening just a fraction. Victor isn't the one who falsified your endorsement. He wouldn't know how. He doesn't have your old files. He doesn't have your old correspondences. He doesn't have access to your personal life. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air like a gathering storm. She didn't just hand him the blade, Harlan. He opened the binder to a new section, and my blood turned to ice, a chill that seeped into my bones. She was the one who honed it. She was the one who showed him where to strike. And in some ways, Harlan, this was all her conception. Desmond didn't say, I warned you. He didn't debate. He's an attorney. He deals in facts. He simply reached into the black binder, the one with my stepdaughter's name on it, and pulled out an 8x10 high-gloss photograph. He didn't toss it. He slid it across the crystal desk. A silent accusation. What is this, I asked, though I knew the image blurring slightly in the low light. That Desmond said, his voice flat, was taken last Thursday night at 10 p.m., roughly 4 hours after they left the tribunal. 4 hours, Harlan, after they filed the legal petition to have you declared mentally unfit. I picked up the photo. My hands were steady, but the image blurred further as my eyes adjusted. It was Victor and Alara. They were at Vantage Grill, that exorbitantly priced fusion eatery downtown, the one Victor always boasted about, the one he said was beyond my realm. They weren't looking at the camera. They were looking at each other. Victor was holding a champagne flute high, his mouth open in a wide, triumphant grin, but it was Alara's face that held my gaze, her eyes gleaming with a joy that cut like a knife. She was laughing. Her head was thrown back, her eyes sparkling a look of pure, unrestrained elation, a look I hadn't seen on her face in years, not since the innocent days of childhood games in the meadows. They were toasting. They're celebrating, I whispered. My stomach turned a nauseous wave rising like bile. They're celebrating. What? That they'd finally done it. It appears so, Desmond said. They're toasting your removal, Harlan. Your erasure. I dropped the photo as if it were scorching. This doesn't prove anything, Desmond. It just shows Victor is celebrating. He's a bully. He triumphed. He probably told her they were celebrating a big deal at work. My Alara, she's just going along. She's impressionable. You said it yourself. She's what Harlan. Desmond cut me off, his voice. Sharp, but not unkind. Weak, naive, scared. Look at that picture again. Does that look like a woman who is scared, or does that look like a woman who just got exactly what she wanted? I couldn't look at it. I turned away, back to the window, back to the city lights shimmering like false promises. I can't. I won't believe it. Not of her. He did this. He poisoned her against me. She's my stepdaughter, Desmond. My young lass. She's a 45-year-old woman. Harlan. Desmond said, his voice hardening. And you're right. A photograph is just a moment. It's subjective. You need to hear it for yourself. I turned around. He was holding a small black digital voice recorder, its surface cold and unyielding. My private examiner isn't inexpensive, Desmond said. He's good. Victor's new glider, the one he acquired with misappropriated enterprise funds, has been wired for sound for the last 3 weeks. My breath hitched, catching like a snag in the fabric of reality. Desmond, it's legal when the enterprise, the one he's pilfering from, authorizes the surveillance to protect its assets. Desmond finished. He's been careless. He feels invincible. And when he feels invincible, he talks. Desmond, I don't know if I can. You have to, Desmond said. He wasn't asking. You have to know who you are fighting, Harlan. You have to stop protecting the ghost of the young girl with braids and see the woman who is trying to destroy you. He pressed the play button. There was a muffled sound, the expensive hum of a luxury glider engine, the faint sound of ambient synth from the audio system. Then Victor's voice, smug and self-satisfied. Victor, well, that was easier than I thought. The clerk at the tribunal barely even glanced at the affidavit. Your endorsement really sold it, darling. A concerned stepdaughter, pure genius. My hand gripped the back of the chair knuckles, whitening like bleached bones. Then her voice. It was her voice. My Alara's voice. But it was different. It was sharp, cold, and high with a giddy, terrible energy that chilled the room. Alara, please, it's done. Now we just have to wait for the magistrate to endorse. How long until the funds from the farmstead liquidation clear? I'm weary of waiting. Victor. Victor. Soon. As soon as the relic is legally invisible. Once he's checked into Twilight Meadows, the loan closes. The review on Wednesday gets plugged and we are $5 million richer. Alara. $5 million. God. Victor. I am so weary of feigning. I am so weary of it. I sank into the chair. My body went weak as if the weight of the betrayal pressed down like an unseen force. Weary of feigning. Feigning what the weekend suppers the I cherish you, father messages she sent me just last fortnight. The concern she simulated when I had the ague last season bringing me broth. That all of it. A performance Victor. He laughed. A deep, ugly sound that grated like metal on stone. You're a hell of a performer, I'll give you that. Oh, Father, you look fatigued. Oh, Father, let me prepare you a meal. You had me deceived for a while there, Alara. Ugh, don't remind me. I can't stand the odor of that old farmstead. It smells like him, like mothballs and defeat. I've been feigning to care for 7 years, Victor. 7 years of listening to his tedious, meaningless tales about the dusting roots. Oh, I knew this farmer I sprayed that field. Who cares? No, I whispered. No, I had told her those tales because she inquired. I thought she was interested in my life and me. Desmond didn't stop the recording. He just watched me, his eyes steady as I unraveled. Alara the man is a humiliation, Victor. A total humiliation. Do you have any idea what it's like? When my new acquaintances, when your colleagues inquire what my father does, I have to fabricate. I have to say, oh, he's an agrotech retired. I can't say the truth. I can't say, oh, he's a retired crop duster who lives in a shack in the sticks. My father is a farce. There was a pause. I could hear her take a breath, the sound labored and deliberate, and then the words that stopped my heart cold. Alara, he's an ambulatory piece of scrap, and I am so glad we are finally disposing it. Scrap. The same word from the message. It wasn't Victor's word. It wasn't his cruelty. It was hers. It had always been hers. Desmond hit the stop button. The silence that rushed into the Apex suite was heavier and more suffocating than any sound pressing in like the vast emptiness of the plains at night. The man I was 30 seconds ago, the sire in denial, was gone. He was dead. She had slain him with those words. It wasn't Victor's plan. It was hers. Victor needed the funds. He was a common pilferer desperate to cover his tracks. But Alara wanted the funds, yes, but she also wanted something else. She wanted me vanished. She wanted to erase the humiliation. She wanted to silence the man who reminded her of a life she was desperate to forget. She wasn't coerced. She wasn't manipulated. She was the engine driving the betrayal with relentless force. I stood up. The man who sat down was a sire in denial. The man who stood up was an originator of the board. Desmond Rousseau said when he answered, "It's done. I'm in. Now I want you to tell me everything the private examiner found. Tell me about the deception. Tell me about the falsified endorsement. Tell me exactly how my stepdaughter and her spouse planned to put me in the scrap heap. I want every single filthy detail because on Wednesday, I'm not just reclaiming my farmstead, I'm reclaiming my enterprise." My denial shattered. The image of my laughing, triumphant stepdaughter toasting my demise, the sound of her voice calling me scrap had killed the sire in me. The man left standing in that resort suite was someone else, someone colder, someone who hadn't been seen in 25 years. "The originator, Desmond," I said. My voice was different. The warmth was gone. The denial was gone. All that was left was a cold, quiet precision that cut through the air like a blade. "The Miriam contingency. You said it was designed to protect the enterprise from my kin." "Yes," Desmond said, watching me, his eyes gauging my reaction like a storm watcher. "Does it apply to her?" Desmond's face was somber. "It applies to any kin member engaged in willful, demonstrable action to defraud you, your assets, or the enterprise." "Yes, Harlan. It applies to Alara fully." "Good," I said. I walked back to the desk. I looked at the binder no longer with fear, but with purpose, the pages rustling slightly in the conditioned air. "Now tell me the rest. Tell me everything she's done." Desmond looked down at his file. He seemed to hesitate as if he knew this next part was a different kind of poison, bitter and lingering. "Harlan," he said slowly, "you're looking at this as a betrayal of you. You're still seeing yourself as the center of their world. You're not. You're just a resource. Victor is a resource. To Alara, everyone is a resource." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "She's with him. They're a team. I heard the recording. They're in this together." "Are they?" Desmond asked. "Victor thinks they are. Victor thinks he's the mastermind, the star director who found a clever way out of a jam. He thinks Alara is just the greedy wife egging him on, happy to spend the funds. He's wrong, Harlan. Victor isn't the player. He is the one being played." Played by who, Desmond didn't answer. He simply reached into the binder and pulled out another 8x10 photograph. It wasn't a grainy surveillance shot from a dark vehicle. This one was clear, taken in the bright daylight of a cafe terrace. I picked it up. It was Alara. She was sitting at a small table clinking a wine glass. She was smiling that same giddy, triumphant smile from the other photo, her eyes alight with calculation. But the man she was toasting was not Victor. "Who is this?" I asked, though I felt a sickening wave of recognition washing over me like a flood in the lowlands. "His name," Desmond said, "is Blaine Whitaker. He's a land development mogul. He's also Victor's primary collaborator in both the Kansas and Iowa silo expansions." I looked closer at the photo. They weren't just clinking glasses. Their knees were touching under the small table. He was leaning in his eyes, locked on her with a hunger that spoke volumes. It was intimate. It was predatory, the sunlight casting harsh shadows that accentuated the deceit. Desmond slid another photo across the desk. This one was from a different angle, clearly taken by the examiner Alara and Blaine in the lavish foyer of the Crest Hotel in the urban core. She was at the registration desk. He was standing just behind her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back, fingers pressing with subtle ownership. The date stamp on the bottom of the photo was small, white, and clear. It was from 4 days ago, the day after she and Victor had filed the petition to have me committed. "She's betraying him too," I whispered. It wasn't a question. The emptiness in my chest deepened, becoming a void that swallowed the last remnants of illusion. The young lass I had tried to shield was not just gone. She had never existed. Why, I asked, my voice hollow, echoing in the vast space. Why him? Victor has the title. He has the compensation. He's her spouse. Because Victor is just a director. Harlan Desmond explained, his voice like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and unyielding. Victor is a subordinate. Blaine owns the development firm. Victor is the intermediary. Blaine is the source. Alara always ascends the hierarchy. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that clouded my thoughts like morning mist over the fields. So she's leaving Victor. She's leaving him for a wealthier man. Is that the story? No, Harlan? Desmond said, his voice dropping. You're still not grasping it. This is not a simple affair. This is an overthrow. She's not leaving Victor for Blaine. She's using Blaine to demolish Victor, and then she's going to demolish Blaine too. She's not ascending the hierarchy, Harlan. She's planning to torch the whole damn structure down after she pilfers the escape pod. Desmond pulled out the final item from the binder. It wasn't a photo. It was another digital recorder, its surface gleaming ominously. The examiner didn't just bug Victor's glider, Harlan. After we saw these photos, we put a bug in her glider too. After we thought we were tracking Victor's conspiracy. We stumbled onto hers. He pressed play. There was the sound of a glider door sealing the beep of a restraint. Then Alara's voice, not giddy this time, but cold and sharp, like a frost-covered blade. Alara. He's so foolish, Blaine. He's just so predictable. He really thinks this is about us advancing. He thinks I'm impressed by his little $5 million scam. A man's voice smooth and confident. Blaine. Blaine. He chuckled. He's a useful fool, darling. That's what he is. But are you sure you have the copies? The real copies, Alara. I have everything. I've been downloading his personal files from his console for 8 months. Every fake invoice Victor created. Every single transfer to his shell entity. I also have the original packs you endorsed for the real price of the silos. The $10 million ones. The ones you're concealing from the revenue service. The confidence in Blaine's voice vanished, replaced by a wary edge. Blaine. Now, sweetheart, that's our safeguard. Alara. No, it's my safeguard. You don't get it, do you? Victor thinks I'm helping him beat the review on Wednesday. He thinks I'm his loyal wife, helping him falsify his own father's name. He thinks I'm going to erase the files for him once the farmstead funds come through, but I've copied everything to an encrypted module. I have his fraud. And Blaine, I have your levy evasion. I stopped breathing the air in the suite, suddenly thin and oppressive. Desmond just watched me, his presence a steady anchor. Do you see it now, Harlan? Desmond asked, pausing the recording. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, the motion heavy with dawning horror. She's aiding him. I finally managed to say, piecing the fragments together like shattered pottery. She's encouraging him to commit the fraud. She pushed him to falsify my name. She needed him to pilfer the funds from my farmstead. Exactly, Desmond confirmed. She needs him to consolidate all the pilfered cash. Victor thinks they're going to use that funds, the $3 million from your farmstead, and whatever else he can drain to start fresh after the review blows over. He thinks they're a team like outlaws in the old tales. But she has copies. I said the monstrosity of the plan dawning on me like an eclipse blotting the sun. She has copies of his fraud, and she has copies of Blaine's levy evasion. She's not his partner. She's his executioner. Desmond nodded, his face somber as a grave. Her endgame is simple. She lets Victor get the $3 million from your farmstead. She lets him plug the void in the books and pass the review on Wednesday. He's safe. He's elated. He thinks he's won. He thinks he's the keenest man in the heartland. Then I finished the words like ice forming on a still pond. On Thursday, she strikes. She blackmails them both, Desmond said. At the same time, she goes to Victor and says, "Give me everything you pilfered from Harvest, or this module goes to the Oversight Commission." And then she goes to Blaine and says, "Give me everything you skimmed from the silo deals, or this module goes to the Revenue Service." She'll demolish them both. She'll take the funds from your farmstead, the funds Victor pilfered, and the funds she blackmails from them, put it all in an offshore ledger, and vanish. And me, I asked. My voice was barely a whisper lost in the vastness. What about me? Desmond looked at me, his eyes full of the pity I had refused to see earlier, deep and unyielding. You, Harlan, you're just the initial capital. You're the casualty she was willing to sacrifice to ignite the conflict. You can find a way in Twilight Meadows, legally unfit, forgotten by the world. You're just the collateral damage. You're the scrap she was disposing to clear the field for her real game. I sat there for a full minute in the most opulent resort room in the city, surrounded by a luxury I had secretly built. And I had never, ever in my 82 years felt so utterly and completely destitute, the weight of it pressing like the endless sky above the plains. The recording stopped. The silence that filled the Apex suite was absolute. It was the silence of a mausoleum heavy with the ghosts of trust betrayed. I sat there motionless, staring at the black digital recorder on the crystal desk. I was 82 years old. I had lived through droughts that withered crops and hopes alike. I had buried my forebears. I had held my wife's hand as she took her last breath, the room filled with the beep of machines and the scent of fading flowers. I thought I understood loss. I thought I knew what pain was. I was wrong. What I felt in that moment was something new. It was a hollowing out. It was the sound of the last door in my heart slamming shut. The lock turning the key, breaking off the young girl who stumbled off her pony, the adolescent who cried over a broken heart, the stepdaughter I escorted to the altar. They were all apparitions. They had perished, and I hadn't even known the woman who had taken their place. The woman on that recording was a stranger, a cold, calculating stranger who had looked at my life, my love, my entire 50-year sacrifice, and had marked it down for demolition. Collateral damage. Scrap. I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold physical weight in my chest like a stone lodged there. I felt the last shred of my paternal love, the stubborn, foolish hope that she was just misguided, wither and die. And then it was gone. All of it. The sorrow, the confusion, the denial. It all burned away, leaving behind something hard, something clean, something cold as forged steel. I slowly stood up. My back, which had been stooped with the imaginary weight of the old pilot for years, straightened with a creak that echoed my resolve. I felt the stiffness in my knees vanish, replaced by a steady strength. I was no longer a sire in mourning. I was the originator of the board, and my enterprise was being robbed. I looked at Desmond. He was watching me, his face a mask of professional concern, waiting like a sentinel. "Desmond," I said. My voice was different. The soft grandfatherly rasp was gone. It was replaced by the voice I used to use in council chambers. The voice that didn't ask, it commanded. The voice that cut through excuses and got to the point sharp as a harvest blade. "You said stage 1 is complete. The auxiliary ledger is frozen." "Yes, Harlan," Desmond confirmed. "Good." I said, "Now stage 2, the farmstead. I don't want the liquidation just dead. I want it undone. I want that falsified authority flagged in every system from here to the offshore hubs. I want Victor Hale's name to be a red beacon that stops every financier in this region." "It's already in motion," Desmond said. "The lender's legal division will have it by 9 a.m. "Not just the lender," I said. "I want the prosecutor's office. This isn't a civil matter anymore. This is criminal fraud. I want a dossier opened." Desmond nodded, a grim flicker of approval in his eyes like lightning on the horizon. "Consider it done." "And stage 3, I said, walking toward the crystal desk. "The Wednesday assembly, the review. I've drafted the urgent notice for the council. Desmond said it goes out tomorrow." "Good." 11 a.m. sharp in the primary council chamber. I want Barrett there. I want the entire managerial committee. I want our chief reviewer, and I want him. "Victor will be there, Harlan. He has to be. It's his review. He'll be there," I said. "But he won't be expecting me." I paused, then looked at my old friend in Desmond. "Yes, Harlan. Call the authorities, not the local outpost. Call your contact at the State Economic Crimes Division. I want them waiting. I want them discreet. I want them in the foyer of the Harvest Edifice at 11:15 a.m. on Wednesday." Desmond raised an eyebrow. "You want him apprehended at the office in front of everyone?" I thought of Alara's message. I thought of her voice, a humiliation. "Scrap." "No," I said, "I don't want him apprehended in front of everyone. I want him apprehended in front of me." The first sign that the world was tilting was at 8:15 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Victor, already attired in his finest power ensemble for the review, tried to purchase Alara a smoothie from the small kiosk in their lobby. The chip was rejected. "Insufficient balance," the attendant said, looking embarrassed for him. That's impossible, Victor snapped. Process it again. Rejected, sir, the attendant repeated, holding the chip out. Alara rolled her eyes. Use mine, Victor, honestly. She handed over her own elite chip, rejected. What is going on? Alara hissed as they walked away coffeeless, the rejection hanging like a bad omen. Victor, did you do something foolish? It's just a system glitch, Victor said. But his fingers were already initiating a call to his private financier, his face pale as milk. He was on hold for less than 15 seconds before the financier picked up, his voice stiff and formal. Mr. Hale, Mr. Hale. Yes, a flag has been placed on your ledgers pending an internal scrutiny. A flag. Remove it. I have affairs to conduct. Victor demanded. I'm afraid I can't do that, sir, the financier said. And there is another matter. The $3 million advance you applied for against the property at rural Route 47, it has been rejected. Victor stopped walking, his steps halting abruptly. Rejected on what grounds? The documentation is solid. The authority document you provided has been declared fraudulent and void by the owner's legal counsel. The financier said, his voice like frost. The county registrar's office has been notified. I'm afraid I cannot discuss this any further. The connection severed. Fraudulent. Alara grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. How could he know? He doesn't. Victor snarled, his mind racing like a malfunctioning drone. It must be an administrative error. That old relic wouldn't know an authority from a flight log. We have to go to the farmstead. We have to find him. We'll make him endorse it again. They didn't wait. They dashed to the leased glider and sped through heartland traffic, ignoring every velocity limit, the vehicle humming with tension. They erupted out of the glider and ran up the pasture past the disposed placard Victor had planted so proudly. Victor slammed his shoulder into the entrance portal, breaking the simple lock with a crack that echoed across the empty fields. Harlan. Father Alara yelled into the silent homestead. The homestead was empty. The barn was tidy. Miriam's rocker was still in its place. It was as if he had simply evaporated into the ether. He's not here, Victor yelled, kicking a barn stool, the wood splintering under his boot. Where is he? Where could that worthless relic go? Victor? Alara said, her voice quiet amid the stillness. She was staring at the entrance portal. Look! He turned. He saw the message affixed to the interior of the portal, the message they hadn't seen when they burst in. Just 2 words written in thick indigo marker. Verify Wednesday. What the hell does that mean? Victor said, ripping it from the portal, the paper tearing slightly. Verify what Wednesday? The review. At that exact moment, both of their devices buzzed simultaneously with a new notification. The sound in the silent homestead was deafening like a siren in the quiet. Victor looked at his. The subject line made his blood run cold. Urgent Council Assembly, 11 a.m., attendance compulsory. Alara looked at hers. Her heart leaped. From the law offices of Desmond Locke. Regarding the estate of Harlan Elias Crow. Your presence is required at Harvest Dynamics headquarters summit level at 11 a.m. to discuss your father's bequest. They stared at each other, processing 2 completely different sets of information, the air thick with unspoken fears. Victor's mind was racing. The review. They must have found the discrepancy. They're calling an urgent assembly. It's fine. I can handle this. I'll just redirect the funds from the Kansas ledger. I'll tell them it's a network error. He was convinced he could deceive his way out. Alara's mind was also racing. His bequest, Desmond Locke, that's his attorney. Oh my God, Victor, the estate of Harlan Elias Crow. That means he's deceased. The relic must have had a cardiac event when he saw the message. He's deceased. We're inheriting. We're affluent. She was convinced she had won. Let's go, Victor said, grabbing his access fob. We have to get to the headquarters. Yes, Alara said, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips like a secret. We have to. They dashed out of the homestead, 2 partners in offense, 2 traitors, each one running toward their own separate and equally erroneous conclusion. They were both about to walk completely blind straight into the executioner's blade. The lift doors opened onto the summit level with a silent, expensive whisper. The air up here was different. It was cool still and smelled faintly of polished metal and ozone from the energy shields. The flooring was so dense it seemed to absorb the sound of their footsteps as they walked the long corridor to the primary council chamber, each step echoing with unspoken dread. Victor Hale adjusted his silk collar. He felt a small bead of sweat on his neck, but he brushed it away, the moisture cold against his skin. This was it, the review. They must have found the discrepancy early. That Verify Wednesday message. The old fool must have contacted Barrett in a panic, babbling about his farmstead. Amateurs. Victor was annoyed but not terrified. He was a chief director. He was the luminary. He could talk his way out of anything. He would blame the algorithmic ledger, a data migration, anything. Alara glided in behind him. She focused on Desmond. "Mr. Locke," she said, her voice soft and trembling just enough to feign grief. "Thank you for handling this so swiftly. I know this is difficult for everyone." Barrett and Desmond exchanged a single brief glance. It was a look that would haunt Victor later, laden with unspoken judgment. Desmond Locke did not stand. He simply motioned to the two empty chairs at the opposite end of the table. "Sit down, Mr. Hale." "Ms. Hale." Victor felt the first real prickle of fear, sharp as a thorn, the way Desmond said Ms. Hale. It wasn't sympathetic. It was cold, like the wind sweeping the plains. Alara felt it too. This didn't feel like the reading of a bequest. It felt like an inquisition, the room's atmosphere thick with tension. "We are not here to discuss your review," Victor Barrett said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual vigor. "And we are not here to discuss an estate," Alara Desmond added, his voice like gravel underfoot. "We are here," Barrett said, "because we are waiting for the originator." Victor frowned. "The originator? I thought he was in a remote enclave. He never attends these things." "He is attending this one," Desmond said. "He has called this assembly to address a situation." Right then, the primary council chamber doors, which they thought were already open, opened wider. A second private door they had never even noticed, the one that led directly from the originator's private lift, whispered open. And Harlan walked in. He walked in. He didn't look like the man who had sat at my workbench eating my venison and clapping me on the shoulder. He wasn't the retired pilot. The old worn jacket was gone. The faded slacks were gone. The posture slightly stooped with age and humility was gone. The man who walked in through that private lift door was 6'3", straight-backed, and wore a dark charcoal bespoke suit that probably cost more than Victor's glider. It wasn't a disguise. It fit him like a second skin, accentuating the quiet power he exuded. He walked with a slow, measured stillness, a deep, quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself, the air seeming to part before him. He was not Harlan. He was Harlan Elias Crow. Victor Hale saw him first, and his brain, so sharp and quick, simply refused to compute the image, short-circuiting like a faulty circuit. He blinked. He actually squinted as if trying to clear his vision amid a haze. "Harlan." Victor's voice was too loud in the silent room, cracking slightly. "Harlan." "What on earth are you doing here? Did you get lost?" He laughed, a short, nervous barking sound that echoed hollowly. He looked around at the silent council members, looking for an ally, for someone else who saw the absurdity in the sterile light. "The maintenance bay is on the ground level." "Relic, this is the summit. This is the managerial council chamber." He turned to Barrett, the executive, his tone shifting to one of annoyance laced with desperation. "Barrett, seriously, can someone get security? My father-in-law he's clearly disoriented. He's been having episodes. This is exactly what I was telling you about Alara." Alara, who had been staring at her father as if he were a specter risen from the fields, was pale as ash. She didn't say anything, her hands trembling imperceptibly. Barrett, the executive, did not smile. He didn't even look at Victor. He stood up. He did it slowly, respectfully, his chair scraping softly. Desmond Locke stood up. The financial officer and the operations officer stood up. The two reviewers from the external firm stood up. Every single person in that room stood up. Not for Victor. They stood up in unison as I, Harlan Elias Crow, walked to the head of the table, the movement synchronized like a ritual. Victor's smile froze. It didn't fade. It froze, stuck on his face in a horrible, confused grimace, his features twisting unnaturally. Barrett, he stammered. What? What is this? Barrett looked at Victor and his eyes were not angry. They were filled with a cold, profound disappointment that was so much worse, piercing like a winter gale. Victor Barrett said, his voice flat. This is not Harlan. You will address him correctly. Address? Address? Who? Victor's voice was getting high, shrill, like a malfunctioning alarm. What are you talking about? That's Harlan Crow. My wife's father. He's a retired Desmond Locke spoke. His voice, unlike my quiet one, was a deep baritone that filled every corner of the room like thunder rolling over the plains. It was the voice of a man who breaks other men for a living. Mr. Hale Desmond said his words sharp and perfectly enunciated. This is Mr. Harlan Elias Crow, the founder, the originator of the board, and the majority shareholder of Harvest Dynamics. The words hit Victor Hale like a physical blow. He actually staggered back a step, one hand flailing, grabbing the back of his chair to steady himself amid the spinning room. What? It was a whisper, barely audible. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time his eyes widening in horror. He saw the suit. He saw the cold, intelligent eyes staring back at him, unblinking. He saw the man who wasn't a pilot but a sovereign. He saw the man who authorized his compensation. No, Victor whispered. His face was white, the color draining from it like water seeping into parched soil. No, that's not possible. You're a pilot. You're nothing. I was a pilot, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a laser. It was an honest job. You should try it sometime. And you, Victor, are a director. Or rather, I paused, letting the words hang. You were. You, Victor's mind was short-circuiting. I could see the connections being made in his frantic gaze. The review. The urgent assembly, the failed advance from the lender, the frozen ledgers, the message, verify Wednesday. He looked at Alara. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror, her composure cracking like dry earth. She wasn't seeing an inheritance, she was seeing the end of her entire life, the foundations crumbling. This is a jest, Victor said, trying to laugh again, but it came out as a desperate strangling sound, choked and pitiful. A setup. Harlan, what did you do? What did you tell them? I didn't answer him. I looked at the chief reviewer. Let's begin. The woman opened her dossier, her movements deliberate. Mr. Hale. We show an initial discrepancy of $5,200,000 in the Iowa and Kansas expansion ledgers routed through a shell entity, Hale Agri LLC, an entity registered in your name. I can explain that Victor said, his voice high and thin, cracking like brittle ice. That's a data error, a migration glitch. The documentation, it's save it, I said, cutting him off. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I took one step toward him, the movement measured. I'm not Barrett. I'm not the council. I'm the man whose farmstead you falsified an endorsement to liquidate. I'm the man you tried to throw in the scrap heap. I looked at the platinum chronometer on my wrist, the one Miriam had given me. It wasn't the expensive one Victor always wore. It was a simple old chronograph, but it kept perfect time ticking steadily. It is 11:04 a.m. I said, You don't have an hour to deceive your way through a review, Victor. You have 30 seconds. 30 seconds to explain to me, your originator, why you have been pilfering from my enterprise. 30 seconds to explain the $5 million void. And you had better be convincing. I leaned in my voice, dropping to a whisper that only he and Alara could hear, because in exactly 2 minutes, 2 officers from the State Economic Crimes Division are walking into this room to apprehend you for criminal transfer fraud. Panic. It was indeed gradual. It was instant. Pure animal panic that twisted his features. Victor's eyes darted around the room like a trapped beast. He saw the reviewers' stony faces. He saw Barrett's disgust. He saw Desmond. His arms crossed, a silent sentinel, unmoving. He saw me. He had no way out. The walls were transparent, but they were closing in the skyline beyond mocking his fall. He did what all cowards do. He did what all rats in a trap do. He turned on the only other rat in the trap with him. He pointed a shaking, accusing finger at his wife. At my stepdaughter, her. He screamed the word. It echoed off the glass skyline, shrill and desperate. It was her, Alara. She made me do it. Alara's head snapped up her face, a mask of disbelief and pure venomous rage that contorted her features. What? She's the one. She's obsessed with wealth. She's the one who's ashamed by you. She pushed me. She said I wasn't man enough, that we needed more. She found the vulnerabilities. She told me how to do it. I did it for her. It was all for her. Her. Victor's scream echoed against the glass. She's the one. It was all her. Alara leaped to her feet, her face a mask of pure venomous rage, her eyes blazing. You lying, pathetic coward. You're blaming me. You're the one who falsified his name. Victor shrieked, pointing at me with a trembling finger. You're the one who told me he was a bumpkin. Silence. Desmond's voice boomed through the room, cutting off their panicked accusations like a scythe through wheat. He picked up a control. You're both fools, he said, his voice dripping with contempt that filled the space. You were so busy robbing the Enterprise, and he looked at Victor. Were so busy robbing your father-in-law, you never stopped to look at the person robbing you. He aimed the control at the massive display screen behind me. It illuminated. It wasn't a ledger. It was a photograph of Alara. At that same cafe terrace, laughing, clinking a wine glass with the man I now knew, was Blaine Whitaker, Victor's collaborator. Then another photo, the Crest Hotel foyer. Blaine's hand on her back. Victor stared at the screen. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged, his jaw slack. He looked at Alara, then at the screen, then back at Alara. The realization hit him, the understanding that he wasn't the player. He was the pawn, the truth crashing like a wave. While you, Desmond, said, his voice cold as a winter night, were busy planning to frame her father. She was busy gathering evidence to blackmail you and your collaborator. She was playing you both. No, Victor whispered. He looked utterly broken, his shoulders slumping. Yes, I said, stepping forward, she was. You're dismissed, Victor, and Barrett. I expect your full cooperation with the federal inquiry. Of course, Mr. Originator, Barrett said, his face grim as stone. As for you, I said to Victor, you were worried about the review. You should have been worried about the authorities. I nodded to Desmond. Desmond picked up his device. Send them in. The primary council chamber doors opened. 2 uniformed officers and a man in a detective ensemble walked in, their steps purposeful. Victor Hale, the detective asked. Victor just nodded, his body slack like a puppet with cut strings. You are under arrest for conspiracy, transfer fraud, and forgery. As they pulled his arms behind his back, as the click of the restraints echoed in the room, like final judgment, Alara finally completely fell apart. She sank to the floor, her expensive black attire puddling around her, her hands grasping desperately. Father, she sobbed, actually crawling a few inches toward me on the dense carpet. Father, please don't let them. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Please, Father, I'm your stepdaughter. I'm your young lass. I looked down at her. The coldness in my chest was absolute, a void without echo. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just an ending as final as harvest's close. I looked at her, then at Victor being led away in restraints. You said my spot was in the scrap heap. I said, my voice quiet, but clear enough for everyone to hear amid the heavy silence. But it seems you two have already taken yourselves out. I turned my back on her. I walked toward my private lift, leaving them both in the ruins of the life they had tried to pilfer, the doors closing with a soft hiss. The lift doors opened to the silence of my suite. Hours had passed. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a quiet, heavy calm that settled like dusk over the fields. My device, the simple one I always carried, was vibrating on the crystal desk. It was a frantic, desperate buzz that wouldn't stop, insistent as a swarm. I walked over and looked at the screen. It glowed with 2 lines. 72 missed calls. Alara. I watched it buzz one more time. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt finished, the chapter closed. My hand reached out and pressed the button on the side. The screen went dark. The buzzing stopped. I silenced her. I picked up the small, faded photograph of Miriam from the desk. I looked at her laughing in the sun. I kept my promise, Miriam. I whispered to her image. I protected our legacy. They mistook our quiet life for weakness. They were wrong. I picked up my tea mug. It was cold now, but I didn't mind the bitterness matching the moment. I took a sip, staring out at the Nebraska skyline at the lights of my city. It was over. Justice was served. I finally felt at peace. Here's the lesson we can learn from this story. This story is a powerful lesson that true wealth is not measured by the vehicle you pilot or the land you till, but by your integrity, character, and the quiet dignity you carry through the storms. It teaches us that greed and betrayal are blinding, causing people to underestimate those they should respect the most. The quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. While money can be stolen, respect is earned, and true family is built on loyalty, not on what can be taken. In the end, underestimating someone based on a humble appearance can be the most expensive mistake you ever make. Did you like my story? And what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next